Welcome to The Lifestyle CEO, a community designed for women looking to take their life into their own hands and redefine what success looks like for them.
I'm Katie, a clinical psychologist and couples therapist. I'm passionate about connecting you with the tools you need to create the life and relationship you want.
And I'm Christina, a marketing and business expert who has built her life around giving herself and those around her the ability to choose what their lifestyle looks like for them.
Together, we have created the podcast for women just like us who are looking to redefine what success looks like for them and enjoy a lifestyle that they love.
Hello.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very good.
It's been a very long time since I ran into you at the hairdresser this morning.
Hashtag mum life in Bali. We're back for episode 2. I'm excited.
Yeah.
I think we got a lot off our chest in episode 1.
We did. We covered a lot of topics, but I think the thing I'm really excited about is that so many of those topics have been covered quite briefly.
Mm-hmm.
We really want to do a deep dive on
Yes.
in future episodes. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, and I think they're really, just from having general conversations with people, they're really topics that everyone is feeling, and I think they're not actually being talked about by a lot of people. So that's kind of again where our conversation and then this podcast came from, is finding someone who actually is just feeling the same about these sort of things. And specifically today we're talking about social media. I think
I'm feeling that stomach. It's my chair. We feel like it's
I think we've both experienced, and this is ironic as a marketer, but I think being from a different generation as to perhaps the ones that grew up with social media, we're finding as business women, it's a very tricky transition to really start playing into this social media game. And I know we're both trying and doing the things.
I think you're doing a lot better. I feel like right now I'm more in it, but I feel like it's very, very new for me.
So share your experience about it.
Well, today we actually ran into each other. I was dressed as a man. And it was quite funny because I'm running into the hairdresser because I'm playing around with social media at the moment, and so one of the things I'm trying to figure out is obviously my audience is very broad because my focus is on relationships, and so that obviously involves men and women. And one of the things I sort of decided is to split that a little bit and go, I have no idea if I'm doing the right thing here, so do not follow my advice like Christina's. But I've chosen Instagram as kind of my female audience, and then YouTube as my male. So on YouTube I'm trying to be a little bit more humorous, a little bit more fun and engaging, and also on Instagram in a slightly different way. And so one of the things is I'm being a man in a relationship with YouTube as a female, and so I was dressed as a man for that. Which is something I've seen content like that before, and I'm sort of thought it is a really great way to kind of showcase relationships and perspectives. But I've kind of struggled with it a bit, and I just thought, it's just going to be so exhausting from going male to female. And so the way I'm doing it is just trying to play one of those roles and then to communicate from that perspective.
Okay.
And then just to highlight skills around that. So, which is really new for me. I'm enjoying it.
That's fun.
The thing, and that's the thing I'm trying to find is how do I actually have fun with this stuff? How do I bring my sense of humour into it so I can actually enjoy making the content?
I love that.
And I feel like for the first time, if I'm brutally honest, this is the first time I felt like I can do this and I'm enjoying it, whereas previously I've really struggled stepping into this.
And it feels really forced when it's not authentic.
It felt really forced and really inauthentic, which I can't remember now, I think I that last time, but I really struggle with that inauthenticity in any space. So for me, it just I had to find my own way in that. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. And I know that you work with people in the space that probably comes up with maybe.
Yeah, and I think, where I work in marketing, I tend to work with founders. So their personal brand is so important to the growth of their business. And that's sort of what we're talking about here. It's I think everyone, and this is kind of what we're talking about on today's podcast in general, is everyone thinks there's almost this secret sauce that needs to be put into social media, or a secret group, and only the people that look a certain way or speak a certain way or do a certain thing are going to be successful with social media. But actually being authentic in that space and sharing your human authentic self social media is how we build trust and credibility, right? That's what people that's how people trust you now. Like, it wasn't like that when I first started marketing. It was like, you do thought leadership articles or you're in the press, and it was much more like a third party endorsement you get. Whereas now people do tend to, like, if you hear a name, you'll Google it straight away, right?
Yeah, you will.
So that online window, and obviously because of SEO, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, that all comes up first. So making sure that you're being seen on those profiles in your authentic way is so important, because if people then do go on to work with you in whatever capacity and you're just a completely different person, they're going to be like, what is this?
Yeah.
And like, I think we've probably all had experiences of this, and I know I've definitely been sucked in by an Instagram marketing campaign, and then I bought a course, and I'm so disappointed by it, and I just can't believe that people are getting the amount of views and the amount of likes and the amount of engagement, and selling like courses for a ridiculous amount of money.
I know, I always do wonder, like, do people actually buy this?
Like, and I'm the person that
I bought it. I say that now, it's funny to do that, so that's kind of funny.
It's like, yeah, but I think that's, and just coming back to what you're saying, is like, actually people can sense like inauthenticity, I think. And I think what we were saying earlier is like, if we as experts, and we've had a long conversation about allowing us,
we're coming back to that expert,
we're talking about this,
its own struggle for us.
And I think we're the generation that our experts have, and we're, as Kate said, we'll talk about this, having done all of their work to get to the level of expertise that is required, and we're not engaging in this social media space and allowing all of this sort of fluff, for want of a better word, to be out there by people who aren't as expert. And I'm not discrediting them at all, but I think we, as the older generation, or whatever we want to call ourselves, are doing a disservice by not putting our expertise out there because we're too scared to do it.
Let's talk about that then.
Let's just dive in.
Because I think the conversation we had after our last recording was, we were talking about this idea of like, us having knowledge and not feeling like we have enough knowledge in an area. And I think the example I've given is, I was approached to do a dating podcast. And so my background is I'm a clinical psychologist. I'm a registered clinical psychologist, which is 8 years of training. And then I've become a certified Gottman therapist, which is its own process and training. And then I've done a master's of sexology, which is another 2 years of, a study and training. And obviously I've been a therapist for quite some time. And before that I had a career, I had a career prior to that in the community sector, so working in the not-for-profit space. And when I was asked about this podcast, I was like, but, I don't know anything about dating.
Can we all just pause? Does anyone else think that she's not an expert on this? Let's say.
But I was trying to explain to you that as clinical psychologists, it's so ingrained in us to not work outside of our scope of practice and be really clear about that. And that's really important, right? So we need to know our boundaries. If I don't know about a particular presentation, I'm not going to work with that presentation. I'm going to refer someone on. It's really important to know the boundaries of our skills. But I think what it has ingrained a little bit too much is like a little bit of a higher standard.
An imposter syndrome.
Yeah, like it's like, if I haven't done 15 years of like university or something, then I'm not an expert in this. And I realized how ridiculous it was, not just because of, I guess, like a particular amount of years of training, but I realized what I brought to that space is some of the diversity in my experience, is being able to, because this particular project I was working on was very focused on the male audience, is being able to hold the male perspective and the female perspective at the same time, having been a couples therapist and also working individually with men and women in different spaces like parenting, etc. So I think, we can really undersell our skills, both at that kind of macro level of like, we bring skills that it doesn't really matter what content that we're working with. Yeah. Like there's those macro skills that we have, but then there's also like life experience in particular areas. And there's also training that we've done in particular areas. And there's also experience that we have and knowledge that we've acquired that way. And I think, it's really one of the things I've noticed since kind of stepping more into the space of social media is there's a real lack of people with that kind of knowledge in this space. So you get people who are talking about things like dating or relationships with no formal qualifications in that space. And I want to be clear, because this is really important to highlight, is that is important to have. Like, we don't want to take away from that because, you know, as a mental health professional, I know the value and appreciate the value in lived experience. So being able to follow someone who's gone through the same journey as you is really important and so important to be able to access that, whether that be because they've gone through a similar trauma, a similar difficult experience, a similar success, they're in a similar stage of life. Like, that relatability is really important.
Yeah, I agree with that.
But that is different to expertise. And then there's different to the person that we want to go to look at, like, okay, I want to change something.
Yeah.
How do I do that? That is a different set of skills.
And it's not just based on someone's individual experience. Because as we know, like, one thing that works for someone is not what's necessarily going to work for someone else, and that's why it's really difficult with everyone. A lot of posts now are making these wild claims, like either they're money orientated or life changing orientated, and it's kind of, I think this almost, I know you're saying it's good for mental health, and I agree from like a relatability process.
Relatability is really important.
But actually, when you're promising these wild things and then people aren't matching up to that, and like if they're going through the course and they haven't made £1 million or they haven't got out of whatever, and you know, or they haven't been able to start their own business, I think it's like that can actually have even more of a detrimental effect in the long run, right?
Absolutely. I think that's the difference with professionals, right? It's like, as we're going back to that idea of like knowing your boundaries and knowing your area of expertise and not overpromising, deliver. Like, you know, we would never do that, right? Like, I know you would never do that professionally, and I would never do that professionally. I'd lose my registration. I'm not going to do that anyway because I have those kind of ethics. But you know, like, when you promise something, it's these kind of very lofty promises, and there is a lot of that on social media.
And it's all clickbaity.
It's very clickbaity, and it's very hard because you are targeting vulnerable people who are really desperate, and that is something I struggle with. It's that people who are very vulnerable, who are like, oh, if I just spend this $3,000 and they've promised me I'll be happy and I'll be okay, and they can't. No one can make that kind of promise.
And I think it also comes down to the fact that, like, we seem to have forgotten that things take time. Like, I know in marketing, and I'm sure it's the same in like psychology, it's like people want instant results. And it's because we're in this society where you're getting instant gratification from your phone, or if you need something from Amazon, you can order it if we deliver the next day. Like, it's all about instant gratification. But actually, things like growing a successful marketing pipeline that's delivering you new business, that can take a good 12 to 24 months. Or, you know, if you're in therapy, I guess it's not a one session and done, right? You know, you're in there for a while.
I wish it was. Like, I always say, I wish I had the magic pill, but it just doesn't exist. There's no magic wand.
And I think, and that's it, the beauty, we've lost that beauty of the journey. And this sort of comes back to that, what we were talking about last time, which was everyone thinks we're aiming for this perfect position, like either it's when I'm this successful I'll be happy, or when I'm in this relationship I'll be happy. But that doesn't exist, and actually the beauty is in the journey. And it's the same with marketing, and to a lesser personal extent, but it's actually testing and learning and evolving constantly as you reach new heights and you learn new things. And I think that we're losing that slightly with this sort of instant gratification society that we're in.
I think we're losing the ability to have joy in that process.
Like, and patience,
And, I'm not good with patience. I'm very determined. I've got a personality being very determined, but patience, I got to work on that one. Look, and this is the thing, right? We all have to work on these qualities, but I think it is, like, as you said, like, it's not going to happen overnight. And so if we're not enjoying that process, if we're not finding a way to like it, and for me, as I was talking about earlier, like, finding a way to enjoy doing social media content, because I was resisting it, because it was not giving me any joy. I didn't feel authentic. I didn't feel connected. I didn't even feel creative in that space.
Whereas just now, like a tick box.
Whereas now I'm like, okay, I've got to find, if I'm going to do this and I'm going to do it well, like, I can be super determined. I can like knuckle down, but I need to enjoy it. And I need to find a way that I can be authentic in it. And I think that's the part that lots of people are struggling in. And particularly when you're starting out, is like, you're trying to find that space where you can engage in social media, but do it in a way that's still you, that you enjoy, that brings creativity, that brings joy, and that's aligned with your values.
And I think that's sort of where we're talking about all the time, is this authenticity and figuring out who you are, and not trying to play into like being someone else or matching what other people are doing. And I think like if you look at, I was reading Forbes yesterday or something, and it was like the girl who's made the most popular TikTok video. It was literally the stupidest like miming video. It had no value, nothing, but somehow she's made like millions of pounds from this. And like I mean, whatever she was trying to do, I don't know, but she was being herself, right? And I think there's no like secret to it. You're not going to watch one video and see millions others pop up and then all of those people are only going to be successful, right?
Yeah.
Everyone is doing it in their own way, and actually the people who are being the most successful are being genuinely themselves. Like we were talking about the Call Her Daddy podcast the other day.
Yeah.
That's just her chatting and being herself. And you know, I think we all were searching for this secret recipe that we're like, right, we're going to find the secret, we're going to make it work. But actually, it's so much easier than that.
Well, this is the secret recipe.
Right?
I just realized
it is.
Like, it is though, isn't it? Like the secret recipe is being yourself.
Yeah.
But I think there is a little trick in that. Like I think it's easy to say just be yourself.
Yeah.
But I can say honestly, like I struggle just being myself on social media. So like it is finding a way to be yourself in that space.
Yeah.
Because I think, you know, I'm sure many of our audience feel this way, that if you're not, I mean, I'm not someone who has like huge social media. I didn't have a social media account before, like work account. So if you're not in that space, it does feel unfamiliar. So you're kind of like finding yourself and finding your groove in there. Or even if you're going from a personal engagement to a professional engagement, I think you're still kind of finding it. Like it's finding yourself in this context.
Yeah, and I guess I think we're thinking maybe from like a image way, so like what videos you're creating, what pictures, but actually I think the most interesting thing is also the content you're sharing. And I think a lot, like as in the written content or the messages you're giving. And I think a lot of people again get a bit wrapped up in like, is that the right thing to say? And obviously there's boundaries around this, but like genuinely what people resonate with the most is you telling your authentic story. And I guess that's what I mean by being yourself. It's like, don't think you have to get to like, I mean, obviously you need some level of expertise, but I think if you have a real niche that really would benefit other people and you have the expertise to back it up, that's okay. And that's enough. You don't need to wait. Like you were saying, I don't need another 15 years of university to make that okay. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's it. It's like knowing your story, which is so individual, and then sharing that, you know? And I think that's where people, I mean, I know I did this. I was always hung up on it. It's like, it's not enough. Like, I don't think I've done enough. I don't think I'm ready. I think I need to reach this milestone. And then in the end, after I did a particular training and I realized no one else is abiding by this rule, I was like, okay, I'm ready.
It's fairly common, particularly amongst women.
Definitely. And like I said, like we've grown up not being in this social media age. So like I was very much, the first few years of the business were built on real, genuine human connection. Like I was going to networking events and it was clients I've worked with in previous jobs or like had met through genuine connection, you know? And then all of a sudden, actually, you've got this whole online space, which opens you up to loads more people, obviously. But it's like, how do you build that connection with people like you do in the real world? And I think it's figuring that out and figuring out how do you get that conversation across that you would have in person, but in like a way that would grab their attention online. Like that's the kind of, there's a lot to unpick and there's just so many more ways you can reach them, but you have to think about what message is going to resonate where, basically.
Yeah, and there is tricky like little elements to it that you don't know until you learn.
For sure. And I think
which is why it's helpful to have some guidance
definitely
in that space for sure, because you can waste a lot of time trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and I think it's also just learning, like testing and learning as you go. Like you always have to give it a try before you know, and figure out what resonates with your audience, get really clear on that, and then just refine it as you go. You're never going to come up with the perfect first post and you're going to go viral and then that'll be it. It's like, okay, that's Christina. You get millions of pounds.
I was real grateful about that one.
And I think it's like, you know, I put some posts up and they'll get loads of likes and others get none. And it's like, there's actually nothing, there's not really anything different. It's like, okay, well, that topic's not relevant, whatever.
Yeah. Or it can just be so many factors, like the time.
Yeah.
You know, it's like anything
so much
in
happening,
life, isn't it? Like there's so much around that context that guides that thing. So don't, lose all hope if you put so much energy into one post.
Yeah.
And that one time you posted it didn't work because you may repost it.
Exactly. Or try it on another platform.
Yeah, and it works really well.
And I think that's, I guess, the lesson of today, if we wanted to sum it up. It's like actually giving it a go and just going for it and believing in yourself enough to know that you've got enough expertise, you've got enough experience, only sharing what you do genuinely know, rather than like trying to pretend you're like I'm not a digital marketing expert, so I would not be talking about Google ads and Facebook ads. Like I don't know what that is, but like, you know, and I think it's just being so comfortable in your niche and knowing it doesn't matter how big or small that is, people will resonate with that. If you have something of value to offer, like that's okay, and just give it a go basically, but don't overthink it really.
And I think letting go of that imposter syndrome and realizing like you know, not everyone does have experience, but I'm sure most of our audience does. Like, just connect and maybe we'll just write it down, like just to kind of we'll be able to look at that and realize all the experiences that you bring, not just in your work history, because it's more than that. It's your life experiences as well, particularly in this kind of space. And looking at that and kind of seeing like you have a lot of qualities already, you have a lot of strengths already, you have a lot that you can offer. But I think that we can minimize that very easily and second guess ourselves. And I kind of think that's part of why we're seeing such a void in social media. Like we're seeing people who don't have, you know, and you were talking about that experience of like purchasing from someone who didn't have a lot of experience, but they're promoting themselves really well. Because I don't know if you found this, but this is what I've found in social media, is that there is a lot of a lack of expertise.
I 100% agree.
There is like, you know, and I get that, like in my space, I mean, you can talk for your space. In my space, it is because we have registration and there's requirements around that, so we're kind of fearful. It takes a bit of time to wrap your head around it. And I think there is also a bit of that like cancel culture kind of fear of like, if I say the wrong thing, everyone's going to kind of take off. Or like it's, I mean, I really also really worry about like I don't want to say anything that hurts people.
No, of course.
And you know, you kind of have to sit with that a little bit, because at a mass scale, whatever you say is not going to land in the way that you want it to for everyone. Like I can be super considered about the way I say things, and I know that there's, you know, someone might respond to it this way or this way, but at the end of the day, like you don't know who's sitting there in that moment, and so you've got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. Take it the way that it was intended.
And I think that could happen in real life as well, surely, right? So I think I guess what scares people about social media is the amount of people that could see it.
Yeah.
And I guess, I mean, but then also in the same breath, actually the amount of noise that's on social media means that there's probably a lot of smaller people that are going to see that than you think.
Yeah.
And also like, I know this sounds ridiculous, but actually I don't think people care as much as we think.
No, I don't think so either. And you've just kind of got to take a little bit of that.
Do it. Yeah.
Just do it. Yeah, you really do.
And just trust, like, I definitely agree that you have to build up a certain level of expertise before you can start sharing that knowledge. But I don't think that stops you maybe sharing relatable posts about it. And I think that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's more when people are promising results from a program they're offering, or, you know, and it's so much overwhelm. Like, and I'm sure as we're talking to busy females who have got, you know, goals for themselves, but they've got a lot of other stuff going on. If you see all of the information, like I was talking about last time about my fitness journey, like there is so much online about the tonic you should take when you first wake up, and what order you should eat in, and how long you should fast, which is different from every expert I see. And it's just like,
and it all contradicts.
It's unbelievable. And it's like, and we sort of said this last time, but it's like, actually, let's just come back and figure out what works for us, and it will just resonate with the right people. And I think we're not trying to capture an audience of like every single person in the world, and we wouldn't do that in business either. So it's like, let's not try and make the masses happy. Let's just think about who we're really trying to serve and what messages will resonate with them.
And I think knowing your intention and knowing your values, so that when maybe something doesn't land the right way, you're okay with that, because you know like where you're coming from and what your goals are and what you're trying to achieve, and you sort of keep coming back to that.
And I think that's it. It's like, just give it a go, And
it goes, find your way.
Find your way.
Only you will be able to do that.
And don't be disheartened. Like, it is a long game. It's not, you can't just do it for a couple of weeks and that will change your business. Like, you're kind of committing to a relationship, basically.
It's a long-term relationship.
Right? And this is the world we're in now. And it's sort of like that. Social media is a channel, like we would consider a website a channel, like we would consider an email list a channel. Like, you've just got to add that top layer on top of a way of pulling people into the fold, basically.
I think it's even more than that, though. Like, I think it has shifted in the way that I think when social media was first around, like, we kind of used it as an add-on. You know what I mean? Like, it was kind of like, oh yeah, like you check up a website, social media account. People can kind of go there if they want to. But I think, as you said, now people, it's the first thing they do. They Google and they want to look at like who you are and what you're about. Yeah. And they want to do a little bit of like research that way. Whereas typically they might have gone to a website and read qualifications and your bio, etc., etc. They want to get more of that natural feel. So I think it's something that, you know, it's become such an integrated way of being and making decisions, purchasing decisions, or life decisions, that we need to be engaged with it. Yeah. And finding information.
Yeah. Amazing.
Good conversation. Yes. I think we could talk for hours.
I know. And as you can probably tell, we're going through our own learning with social media. At the moment. But I think what we've learned probably is just like, we have to be in it. We have to be doing it.
We have to be in it. We have to be doing it our way. We have to find joy in it. We have to have that creative outlet in it. And we need to come back to like our own intention and our own values and stay aligned with that.
Yeah, and we'd love to hear if like anyone else has experience with this and like what you've learned, either good things or mistakes, and like how you're sort of combating this imposter syndrome feeling, which I feel like everyone feels. Yeah. But yeah, that was a really good conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
See you next week.
Thanks, bye.
If you're ready to create a life on your terms, join us every week and make sure to like and subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes. All the links to keep in touch with us are in the bio.